Well, good evening, everyone, distinguished guests, community partners, and members of the Fordham University community. It is an honor to welcome you all to this conversation on exoneration, education, and change with Dr. Yusef Salaam. My name is Keisha Shea. I am the Associate Director for Academic Development and Administration for the Center for Community Engaged Learning. At the Center for Community Engaged Learning, we believe that community engagement is a vital component of learning and personal growth. We strive to provide opportunities for students, faculty, and staff, and community members to engage with one another in meaningful ways that benefit both the individual and the broader community. Our commitment to community engagement is rooted in the belief that we are all interconnected and that our collective well-being depends on our ability to work together toward shared goals. We believe that by bringing together people with diverse backgrounds and experiences, we can create a more inclusive, equitable, and just society. Today, we have the great privilege of hearing from Dr. Yusef Salaam, one of the exonerated five, whose story of wrongful conviction and incarceration has deeply impacted our society. Dr. Salaam's experience highlights the urgent need for reform in our criminal justice system and challenges us to confront the systemic issues that perpetuate injustice. I am confident that today's conversation will be enlightening and thought-provoking, and I am grateful to Dr. Salaam for sharing his story with us. I invite us to listen with open hearts and minds and continue to strive towards a more just and equitable society. So we're grateful to all of you that have joined us here today for this vital conversation, and thank you, Dr. Salaam, for electing to lead this timely discussion. Before we begin, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the exceptional work of Dr. Hoffman, who is retiring after many years of dedicated service as a professor at Fordham University. Dr. Hoffman has made a significant impact on the university, particularly in her commitment to challenging students to explore complex issues in prison and post-incarceration. Her work has left a lasting legacy that will continue to inspire future generations of students and educators, and she plans to continue this work after retirement. I am thrilled to highlight Dr. Hoffman's current community engaged learning course, Incarceration, History, Literature, and Film. The class was instrumental in centering today's conversation. And we will have two students from this course moderate for us, Tristan Edwards and Cecilia Fraser. This course offers a unique opportunity for students to examine the historical, literary, and cinematic representations of incarceration in America. Through critical analysis and discussion, students are challenged to think deeply about the impact of incarceration and individuals and communities and the role it plays in our society. So we are very grateful for this course that helped to form today's event. And thank you all again for joining us. I now call to the podium Tristan Edwards, who will read the bio of our esteemed guest speaker, Dr. Salaam, Yusef Salaam. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tristan Edwards, and I'm a current senior here at Fordham University Lincoln Center, and I have the great honor and privilege of introducing Dr. Yusef Salaam today. In 1989, at just 15 years young, Dr. Yusef Salaam was tried and convicted in the Central Park jogger case, along with 4 other Black and Latinx young men. The exonerated 5 spent between 7 to 13 years behind bars for crimes they did not commit, until their sentences were overturned in 2002. Since then, they have received a multi-million-dollar settlement from the city of New York for its injustice and have been profiled in award-winning films, including the Central Park 5 documentary from Ken Burns, Sarah Burns, and David McMahon, and most recently, the Emmy Award-winning Netflix limited series, When They See Us, written and directed by Ava DuVernay. Over the past 2 decades, Yusef has become a family man, father, poet, activist, inspirational speaker, and more. He continues to utilize his platform to share his story with others and educate the public about the impact of mass incarceration and police brutality rooted in our justice system. He regularly advocates for criminal justice reform, prison reform, and the abolition of juvenile solitary confinement and capital punishment. Yusef is also a New York Times bestselling author and recently released his memoir, Better Not Bitter, detailing his journey where in the face of misjustice, Yusef found hope. Yusef is a recipient of a Lifetime Achievement Award from President Barack Obama in 2016, and more recently has shared his story and stance on current issues on CNN, MSNBC, Revolt TV, NPR Atlanta, Fox, and more. Please give a warm Fordham welcome to Dr. Yusef Salaam.
First of all, it's great to see you all. May the peace, mercy, and blessings of the owner of all peace, mercy, and blessings be upon all of you. You know, I was introduced to the world at 15 as a pariah. They looked at the color of my skin and judged me by it. They didn't look at the character of myself. In fact, I think they denied the very humanity of my person. As a young child my American dream was riding my skateboard. I used to go to LaGuardia High School right behind us as a graphic designer. As a matter of fact, this book that is not for sale anywhere other than in my garage has my artwork all over it. This was the calligraphy that I used to create the cover. But to be awakened to what I call the American nightmare, no one should ever be awakened that way. But it's a challenge question I think that's put in front of us. And the challenge is that, are we going to remember in the memory that is sacred? I call it the Sankofa of memory. Reminding yourself who you are, and more importantly, whose you are. So that when oppression and things come to challenge you, you get the opportunity, as the great philosopher Cardi B said, knock me down 9 times and get up 10. Because life is interesting. Life, if you really, really analyze it, when you look back, you realize that everything that happens to you is actually happening for you. The good, the bad, the ugly. As a matter of fact, I'm a part of a faith that believes that if you win, it's a test. And if you lose, it's a test. So always be mindful that the tests are there to help you, to sharpen you, to do something. And the best thing about my story is that they really didn't know who they had. The Central Park jogger case is one of the most unfortunate of stories. I mean, when you think about it, 5 young boys arrested for a crime that they didn't commit. But the whole world was made to believe that they actually did it. They were told that even though there was no DNA evidence in this case, that we should send them to jail anyway, because they had to have done something. And that's not the word of the common person, but I think that that was the word of the former president. He said they had to be guilty of something. He was the one who actually took out full-page ads in 1989, calling for the state to kill us. This ad was an ad that was a whisper into the darker enclaves of society, that they should do to us what they had done to Emmett Till. Bring back the death penalty was the urging. bring back our police. And when you think about the fact that I talk about Emmett Till in this space, I'm reminding us that the woman who accused Emmett Till of whistling said that she made the story up. But my question is even deeper than that. Is whistling a crime? Because to be living in the juxtaposition of being born on purpose and being told that you were born to be less than is the same conditioning, I think, that the gnat who was placed in the box, and I forget the science that was done on this, but I remember hearing Stacey Abrams say, those who have been made to live below the gnat line, that the gnat can actually jump higher than it's made to believe. But because it's been placed in confinement, it believes that it only has the opportunity to jump but so high. Back in 1989, my mother gave me words that I'll never forget. And I'm so thankful that she's still here with us. You know, we're losing all of the greats. Mighty trees are falling all around us. The other day, it was Alton Maddox, one of the heroes of the Central Park jogger case, because he was able to take his client and remove him from the Central Park jogger case, never allowing him to go to prison for that crime. We just lost Harry Belafonte, who was a hero of mine and still is. I'm thankful to call his daughter my friend. I actually texted her because I knew she would be overwhelmed by the outpouring of support, of love, of concern. And so I texted her that we were praying for her, that we were thinking about her. And it's a noble thing to be in that same space, to have to pick up the baton, carry on tradition in many ways, I would say. You know, you have to, there are those who have been called. And I was called. I didn't want to go, but they said you. And think about it. Think about the juxtaposition of being called. When the Creator created us, in fact, when our parents got together, we all were one of over 400 million options. And if you can add cinema to it, maybe a little bit of Hollywood, you would imagine that one of the options may say, me, it's my turn, me. And the Creator says, no, not you, come on. Come on, you keep jumping in front of the... Next time. You're next time. But this one, this is what I want. I need this one here. And of course, that one is us. So that means that we were born on purpose and we were born with a purpose. Imagine if all of us lived in that truth. My mother had to remind me at 15. She had to remind me 34 years ago. And the way she reminded me when she came to the precinct after she was told that the police came and got me. As I'm told, my mother didn't believe my sister or brother. She said, you know, stop playing, where's Yusef? She started looking under the couch, looking behind the couch, looking in the closets. You know, like, come on, this is not funny. Where's Yusef? No, Ma, they took him. My mother had been telling me all my life that she was raised in the Jim Crow South. I had no idea what she was talking about. I didn't read the 13th Amendment until I got to prison. And even when I read it there, I thought Ashton Kutcher was making a joke, and come on, you can't be serious. The Emancipation Proclamation, which so-called freed the slaves, if you understand what is being said there, it is not a law, but actually it is a proclamation. Hear ye, hear ye. So that therefore in the 13th Amendment, and I think it was so important, I actually wrote it in my book, Punching the Air. This is in the chapter called African American 2. While we talk, shout, whisper, Imani writes on her poster board, the 13th Amendment. Then she writes some more words, and Dr. Benu nods. Y'all should know this, he says. Y'all really should understand this. Constitution of the United States of America, 13th Amendment. Section 1, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. That means that slavery is alive and sick. That means it was allowed to continue by another name. That means that all of the things that we imagined to be is not, and therefore we all are Neo in the Matrix, part 1. I gotta put part 1 there because sometimes, you think about the series, you gotta remember the origin story, part 1. That we all feel like something is wrong. And so at that moment when my mother got to the precinct, she didn't come in and, if y'all have seen When They See Us, there's a beautiful portrayal of my mother, the spirit that we all have to fight for our loved ones in. She comes into the interrogation room. She pries me out of the clutches of the enemy and then shames them for good measure. Her cape was still blowing in the wind. That's a little bit of Hollywood, but the truth of the matter is that my mother advocated for me that way. When she got to the precinct, what you don't see on camera is she said to me, or rather she didn't say to me, "How they treating you, baby? Are you okay? Did you have something to eat?" She knew that she had taught us as latchkey children. I didn't know I was a latchkey child. As a matter of fact, if somebody said you're a latchkey child, I was like, what the heck is that? But I was a latchkey child, the child that has the key around their neck. I used to have mine in my pocket, and when we came home, we knew how to make rice and chicken and salmon and lamb chops and all of that good stuff, vegetables. My food was still home when my mother got there. She didn't say, "How they treating you, baby? Did you have something to eat? Did they give you something to eat?" My mother had been telling me she was raised in the Jim Crow South, and at that very moment, it was go time. She said to me, "Stop talking to them." And then the very next thing she said, I take it with me everywhere. I share it with everyone I know, because these words saved my life. My mother said, "They need you to participate in whatever it is they are trying to do. Do not participate. Refuse." In that moment, she was teaching me how to stand my ground. In that moment when she left, I had to go back into the interrogation room and use those words which disallowed me from making a false statement, written or videotaped. I was the only one that never made a written or videotaped confession. I had to take those words back into the courtroom when they convicted us. And they told us to stand and put our hands behind our backs all over again and led us to the back. And then we had to start doing hard time. I had to take those words into the prison to ensure that I didn't become a monster. Because the system wants to make you believe that they need to create cages in order to catch and capture monsters when they're creating conditions right before our eyes. I had to take those same words, "They need you to participate in whatever it is they're trying to do. Do not participate, refuse," back into the world as I was rebirthed back into society. Because it's easy to go back if you've already been there. It's called recidivism. Malcolm X, my hero, he reminded us that education is the passport to the future. In fact, he said that those who were becoming educated, he realized they never came back to prison. And studies have shown that people who get educated they perhaps are less than 1% of them go back to prison, of the totality. And the importance of it all is to understand where we are. I said earlier that we were born on purpose and with a purpose. So that same story of the birds and the bees cleaned up for all audiences. We were each one of over 400 million options, and we made it. The intentionality in that couldn't be more pronounced for me until when I got to the prison and an officer asked me a question that seemed very simple. He said to me, "Who are you?" And I said, I'm Yusef Salaam, one of the guys that they accused of raping the Central Park jogger, but I didn't do it. He said, "I know that." This is an officer telling me that he knows that I did not do this crime. He said, "I've been watching you. You're not supposed to be here. Who are you?" This question was so profound, I wrote it in my book of poetry. And in a very succinct way, I answered the question, searching to find who has come, a beautiful soul, a powerful one. You see, even though I didn't give birth to any of my children, my wife did, my ex-wife did. I have 10 beautiful children, 7 girls, 3 boys. But in the tradition of spirituality and of Africa, we follow the same tradition. We observe the child. On my birth certificate, it actually said Boy Salaam. On my birth certificate is an indicator that the parents were searching to find who has come. A beautiful soul, a powerful one. They are the caretakers. And in that question, they were to observe the child for 7 days so that they can then turn to the community in what is called a baby naming ceremony and present for the first time. My name is Yusef Idris Fa'adil Abdus Salam. Now I know that's a whole mouthful. Like some of y'all know, and some of y'all are like, "Ooh, that's a lot." Got a whole sentence. So as I was growing up, when people asked me, "What's your name?" I would say Yusef. And then some people would say, "Joseph." My good friend Joseph is in the audience with us. And I didn't know that Joseph was the Arabic, like that's the English equivalent to Yusef. So I would sometimes get upset because it was like back then, y'all know. Sometimes when people have like a little bit of speech impediment, you say Yusef, and they say, "No, Joseph." They say so much, so finally I just said, that's close enough. But in prison, I didn't know what my name meant. In fact, they didn't know who they had, and I dare to also say, I didn't know who I was. And so this question that was asked of me, "Who are you?" I had to find myself in the prison, defining that. And I found that my parents named me what means God will increase the teacher with justice and peace. I found as I read the Bible, there was a young man in there named Yusef. And then I read the Quran, and there's a young man in there named Joseph. And of course, I'm mixing up the Arabic and English on purpose because the story is the same. About a young man who went to prison for a crime he didn't commit, who became a prophet. And God blessed him with gifts. But it was the trajectory of his life that's important over and above the gift. The trajectory was that what happened to him happened for him. And it created the conditions through which his gift was going to be shown to the world. And so I know I'm probably at time in terms of the introduction. You know, you got to forgive me. I'm used to going for about an hour just telling the story, and I'm not even really halfway through when it's an hour of time. But this is one of those most beautiful stories because I call the Central Park jogger case because of what I found out about it, because of my survival of it. I call the Central Park jogger case a love story between God and his people. It's a story of a criminal system of injustice placed on trial in order to produce a miracle in modern time. It's a story that we can get information from, that we can get a lesson from, that the system will bury you alive and forget that you are a seed. And instead of a social death, we get the opportunity to emerge like the phoenix from the ashes. Because as they built the fire to consume us, they forgot the owner of the heat. And so the beauty of the story is that 34 years later, I get the opportunity to consider what's next. Everybody wants to be a diamond. Everybody wants to have a beautiful life. But what it takes to become a diamond is pressure upon pressure that will break you. And then more pressure on top of that. Because it is the transfiguration, I think I'm saying that word correctly. It's transferring one thing into another, like alchemy. And diamonds, I don't know if you realized it, but they don't shine. Diamonds are precious, they do not shine. And just like a diamond, if you get the opportunity to become a diamond, my hope is that you get the opportunity to reflect the light. Because that same light that is placed in you is the light that will make darkness disappear all around you. Your life will be a testimony that miracles are happening right now in our lifetime. And for me, it was to connect me to the faith in such a way that I would never let go. Because when you're in prison and you got a sore throat, your mom ain't there to give you honey and lemon and ginger. As a matter of fact, they used to experiment on us. And it's crazy because when you think about all of the conditions that you're under, to be relegated to second-class citizenship is one thing. But when my mother said that words to me, what I want to tell you is this. This ad was a gift. I don't know if I want to call it a gift. I'm going to call it a gift. This ad was a gift. I might say it's a gift that keeps on giving because it shows up in modern time, and I talked recently on social media about the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. But I call it a gift because in this ad, in what was happening, there was a choice. The choice was, are you going to accept a definition for yourself that the Creator did not create for you? Like the Creator told you to be, and here you are. That means that we don't have to ask permission to live our life. The question is, are we going to live full so that we can die empty? So that when we come to the end of our lives, we wouldn't have put all of our hopes and dreams on an island called someday that never comes. Because just like my good friend Les Brown said, that the most wealthiest place in the world is not Africa where there's gold and diamonds, and they're also finding oil. There's a big conflict in Sudan right now. It's not in the Middle East where there is oil. The most wealthiest place in the world is actually the graveyard, where people's hopes and dreams and aspirations that they put on an island called someday have gone to die. And so our challenge is to live full so that when we come to the end of our life, we will be well-pleasing, and well-pleased. So I'm gonna stop there, I think, to hopefully open up our conversation.
So much to say. So much to say. So much to discuss today. Dr. Salaam, I'm interested. You mentioned you have 7 boys, 3 girls.
No.
7 boys,
Somebody get it right?
7 girls,
7 girls.
3 boys.
Three
Thank
boys,
y'all.
yeah.
Yes. And I'm interested, and you talk about what your mother told you when you were at the precinct. And I'm curious, what are some of those lessons you are instilling in your children today, having reflected on your experience, lived your experience? Yeah, I'm curious.
I mean, the biggest lesson, I think, is to stay on point. See, it's one thing, like when you live life and you really don't know yet, right? There's an Arabic word called ta'lamu, right? Ta'lamu is not just like, oh yeah, I know where to go, I know which road to go, I know what store to go to. No, ta'lamu is like, you really don't know. Like, you don't have the full knowledge, like, of the totality of this thing in time, right? I tell my children to stay on point because the best gift that you can give them is the understanding of how to break generational curses. And so as we live our lives, right, my children are becoming old enough, some of them, to understand fully what it is that I had gone through. But the youngest of them, they're like, Dad is famous. I'm like, I am not famous. I'm just a regular guy who happened to hold on to the rope. And when you hold on to the rope, that holding on makes you resilient because you have to think in the moment. Because we're at war, right? We're at war, and the war, as a matter of fact, I'm gonna read this to you. This is a poem, like I call this is one of the poems I wrote just to give you an understanding of what this book is. This book was written while I was in prison. But one of these poems I wrote when I came home from prison is called Heartbeat. And here it says, we are at war, the bulk of which will not be physical, the bulk of which is mental. Psychological warfare to make me accept you as better, like your ice is cooler or your water wetter. They're holding court in the streets. This time court will be sweet. We will not accept defeat. The signal will be your heartbeat. To remind people who are under you, who you are the caretaker of, to stay on point, is to let them know that you cannot assume that because I came through the storm won't come to you as well. As a matter of fact, I had the opportunity, as I do every year, I was born into the faith of Islam. And I had the opportunity, as we fasted this past Ramadan, it's crazy to say past because it was just here. People ask me, what is Ramadan? And I say, you know that time like where people, they do like spring cleaning, they clean up the house and they make sure that everything is clean, they got the dust off the TV and the shades, they looking in places that they didn't look before. Because when you clean on a regular basis, you might just sweep up. But when you're doing a spring cleaning, you're like, man, I gotta make sure I lift the toilet seat and unscrew the screws that's holding the toilet seat, because there's some stuff behind there that y'all really don't want to see. And if you got folks coming over, you really want to have that place clean because you want people to be able to say, it smells good in here. You don't want to become nose deaf. I don't know if that's the right term, but you don't want to become deaf to the smell in the house. But as you clean, you're cleaning knowing that another spring is coming and you're going to have to do another spring cleaning. And so the beautiful thing about Ramadan is that you get the opportunity to examine yourself without the outside influence of any whisper of evil. And in the examination, when things happen that you may consider, oh man, I didn't know I was shucks, I gotta deal with that. I might have a little bit of road rage, or I might, man, I might have some arrogance, or I might, whatever it is. But you get the opportunity to examine yourself without any outside influence of evil, to really begin to spruce yourself up, And so it is with the children. I say to them, look, we're promised that we're going to be tested at least, not at most, at least once or twice every year. And trust me, the tests are not going to be as easy as you may have seen them come, right? One test may be, oh man, I missed the train. I mean, that happens to that's a New York thing. That's actually a phenomenon in New York, right? Folks should be fired if they miss the train. You know what I'm saying? But in resilience, as we begin to shape ourselves into becoming better, we won't blame the conditions on the train. We'll say, shucks, I just got to get up a little earlier. And the funny thing about it is that looking at life like that, like challenging yourself like that, it causes you to become better, reliable. People say, wow, something about that person. My good friend Ellie Ellis, God bless the dead, he used to always tell us, he said, if you stay ready, you don't got to get ready. Now, I don't mean sleep in the bed with your suit, because you want to make sure that you're spruced up as well when you get up, right? But the challenge of being able to impart that pattern in your child. My children don't always get the opportunity to hear me speak. And I've been throughout the world encouraging people with my story. But with my children, I need them to know that in the sacredness of the Sankofa of memory, and I'm saying it that way because those of us who understand what Sankofa is, and those of us who understand what memory is, realize that Sankofa is to go back and get something. But what if that something is not in your own existence, in your own experience? You then have to understand that in the sacredness of time, you can literally imagine in a very real way that even this day, this moment right here, these words that are being formed in my mouth as I say what I'm about to say, is a word that is being written on a sentence, in a paragraph, on a page, in a book called time. I mean, that's how profound it is, right? The fact that the pyramids are still here and we can go there and see the pyramids means that we are in the sacredness of time because people walked here before. And what lessons do we get and what blessings do we get from being able to get that? And so as they place themselves in the sacredness of time, what I'm trying to impart with my children in terms of telling them to stay on point and being the example for them is that I want, when it comes to the end of my life and I am passing back the baton filled with my deoxyribonucleic acid, the very DNA in all of us, that when they grab it, they will know how to break generational curses because they've been patterned on it. All throughout Scripture, we read the Creator telling His servants, do not be afraid. That doesn't mean fear is not going to come. But you got to move throughout life courageously. Because courage is not the absence of fear, but it's acknowledgement and still standing in spite of it all to do what's right. And so with my children, especially the girls, right? 7 girls. Maybe I should just level set for a moment, because I did say my wife and my ex-wife, right? So my current wife, she had 3 babies when I met her. I had 3 babies when I met her, right? And so instantaneously, we became the Brady Bunch. And then when we began to grow our family, she had 2 boys and a girl, and I had 3 girls. And so another girl came out. And then another girl came out. And those of you who know what I'm doing, there's a TV show back in the days, because I did say the Brady Bunch. There's another TV show called 8 is Enough. But there's a statement that says 3 times is a charm. So another girl came out. You know, the good book says be fruitful and multiply. So I told people I was just playing my part. But the most interesting thing was that on my birthday in 2016, my son was born to me on my birthday. And it was such a beautiful, interesting thing because not only was he born to me on my birthday, after the waiting time, I said his name is going to be Yusef. Because my hope and prayer is that he will have all of the benefit, but none of the stress. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. But the challenge is that, like, how do you teach your children to stay on point? Because when they live in a world, like, right? How many people in this room know about the term called YOLO?
Oh, yeah.
Right? Yeah. I didn't know what that meant. Yeah, I used to be going around, and I'm in universities, and I'm in Africa, I'm in the Middle East. And I'm like, I came one day to one of my daughters. I said, I keep hearing people say this term YOLO. What does it mean? And my daughter looked at me, and she was like, she looked at me like I was living under a rock. And she was like, Dad, you only live once. I was like, oh, got it. But it's interesting, though, because as I begin, you know, because I'm a thinker, because, you know, when I think about why, like, children are the ones who are the caretakers of tomorrow. And so when they create things, they create culture, they create everything. Everything that we have is created because the young mind created it. And therefore, it's important for us to be able to pour into those young minds to realize that that purpose that they were here for, they could be exhibiting it right now. Even a Kevin Hart, right? I think he mentioned, like, had his teacher said, stop being a class clown, he would not have become Kevin Hart, right? I mean, it's important. But what I'm very much aware of in the young person's creation of a term called YOLO, because they're giving it language, it's almost like they are in the space of our first foreparents. When God said, what is the name of this? And the angelic beings was like, I don't know what that is. You know, the only thing we got is what you gave us. And then he turned to this vicegerent. I said, what is that, Diane? And it's interesting because when you read to understand, you realize that he wasn't just naming things. He was identifying all things and giving it meaning. And so when our children do that, our children are creating language around ideas. YOLO. YOLO doesn't mean you only live once, just you only live once in a young person's mind. Especially not when they pick up their phone and they see Breonna Taylor just got murdered. They see Ramarley Graham just got murdered. They see Eric Gardner. They see George Floyd. They see a whole laundry list of folks. In the young person's mind, when they say YOLO, they are talking about the antithesis of planning. We don't need to plan. Life is not guaranteed. I don't need to save no money because I've already been told through technology, almost hypnosis. There was a song, y'all remember it? Song that came out, I mean, some of y'all may remember it. But the hook said, spin that check and get it right back. Some of y'all were spending that check. It wasn't coming back. But it's technology. And all I'm saying is that when you are given despair and hopelessness and you live in that, your conditions tell you, drink it all, smoke it all. Don't plan for the future. Do everything because you're not guaranteed tomorrow. But the question is, if you do that for a day and you wake up tomorrow and you're still here, if you do it for a year and you wake up and you're still here, if you do it for 5 years, you're digging yourself into a hole that you will never be able to get out of. And so in the challenge of YOLO and the challenge of being able to give the children the pattern, the ability to stay on point, is to understand that we have never been gifted with the art of war that teaches us how to plan. We'll plan for the weekend, right? Yeah. I mean, we are in college, right? I'm not planning for the weekend, you know. The best of us will say, you know, you got to have a 5-year plan. Some say, you know, go a little bit further, have a 10-year plan. I'm saying I've never considered myself as a 15-year-old being 49 years old sitting in front of an audience at Fordham University. What happens when our youngest projects themselves into the future? It's still sacred time. We're going to be there whether we like it or not, if we are given time to get there. And so the challenge is to be able to utilize our minds in such a way where we begin to illuminate the darkness even in our minds. Because if we're given an outlook, like we all have eyes, and some of us have eyes and some of us don't see the same thing, you know? You might be with a friend. Did you just see that? What you talking about? Oh, man, you missed it. My son hates it when the children in the car, they say, wow, look at that. My son, where? Oh, man, I missed it, you know? But some of us have, like, we really have eyes and we just don't see the same thing. We have ears and we don't hear the same thing. And in the challenge is when you teach your children, I mean, it's desperate, right? It's a desperate thing because these are women. Women are the most sacred creation. Why? Because they're the only ones who give birth to nations. That's it. And so if as a child of Yusef, right? I mean, when I first started having my female children, I said, man, I'm gonna have to call myself the father of woman. Because I didn't have no men in my, I was like, dang, I guess I'm like Malcolm X. That's a good thing to be, right? Mm-hmm. But that's the biggest challenge. How do you gift them the ability to take all of the lessons and then they plan not for the future in a weekend, not a 5-year plan, but how do we have generational plans? Because we are definitely living under the oppression of someone's generational plan. That's why it feels like we all Neo in the Matrix. Because this can't be life. Consider even the person who consumes intoxicants. They might believe more than the person who says that they believe. Because every time they open their eyes, just like when I was in prison, I said, I can't believe I'm still here. I wanted to go back to sleep. Some of us do that in real life. Pull the curtains close. Consider that the sun and the light that comes from the sun is traveling at a certain speed. That speed, when it hits the earth, it actually causes the earth to rotate. So that means that if I cloak myself in darkness, disallowing light to come in, what's going to happen to my very being? I'm going to pull over to on the side of the road of the highway of life, and I'm not even going to turn my blinkers on. That means that I've checked out. I've said, you know what? It ain't worth it. YOLO, like listen, I'm just going, they say you're going to be dead or in jail before you reach the age of 21 anyway. So I guess this is my time. The challenge is, which one of us has decided that as a plan for our lives? Even if that condition is prevalent in our communities, who in our community has physically wrote down, you know what, I want to get that Mercedes Benz and I'm gonna eat the good steaks and man, I'm gonna run the block. But you know what? By the time I turn 21, I think I want to be dead or in jail before I reach it. And I'm saying that because sometimes if we just put the stuff on the table, the conditions that we are underneath, we will then almost just like that begin to figure a way out of that. Nobody wants to be dead or in jail before they reach the age of 21. I most certainly didn't. But what I found out, I found the secret. The secret is, in your planning, you also have to have a vision. Because if you can't see it, you can't be it. And so I tell my children that as well. You have to be able to see it in your mind's eye. And more important than that, if you can see it, wherever your mind goes, your body follows.
Yeah, boom, right.
I guess, yeah, maybe it's a large question, but you talk about what you're preparing your children to do, helping them, I think it's on, okay, cool. Helping them to understand what they're going to move forward with, what they're going to stand for when it comes to generational trauma. I am wondering, in a system that so clearly is built on racism or other, oh, okay, thank you, other prejudices, if it's possible to undo that harm and change it, or undo the system and change the way it is without first dealing with those concepts of racism or prejudice. Because I think there's a quote that we read in class that we can't wait for racism or sexism or things like that to disappear before we change the system as the way it is. And I'm wondering, maybe it's, like I said, a big question, but if the system is built on values such as that, how do we change it without changing those values?
So I love that question, actually. All of this is powerful because, when I think about systems and the fact that we are oppressed, when we wake up and realize the truth, like the biggest truth is not that we're fighting racism. The biggest truth is not that we're fighting any isms. The biggest truth, when you really, really, really examine it, is that we are fighting against spiritual wickedness in high and low places. Because if in the Sudan, you have people who have found oil in their land, fighting people who look like them in order to be the people who are in charge, who can benefit. It is the best planning in that particular thing is to organize so that you become a power that benefits your people, and then you are powerful in the world and can then dictate terms and ideas and the direction for your people. Similarly, if I look at America, oppression is very black and white. It's very racist. But if you look at the Middle East, and you say, okay, well, you look at Palestine and Israel, like, if I didn't know what was going on, I would say, wow, these folks who look like each other are shooting each other and doing this and doing that, and like, what's really going on? Some of them are living in abject poverty and still have goodness and love in their heart, even though the conditions are trying to create a situation where they just say, you know what, I'm just going to give up and go. It's a big challenge because we can't wait. Like, I think the beauty of being activated, and I'm going to call it that, those of us who are fighting, right, for justice, for equality, for fairness, right? Those of us who have been activated, we can't wait. Because I used to think, and perhaps it's true, that there's more good in the world than there's evil. But when I tell you, when I read scripture and I read about the brothers of Joseph, peace be upon him, and I say to myself, here is a story that is captured for us to get wisdom from. What is being said in this story? The brothers said, let us do this one evil act, and then we will reform ourselves. Look at the challenge. When you step into being a people who do evil, it's just like the ratings on TVs back in the days. Those TV shows that were rated PG-13, they weren't supposed to be shown to a 11-year-old or 12-year-old. But the ratings today have kind of, there's like a lot of blurred lines, right? I remember back in the days, and regardless of what's going on in the world, the Cosby Show gave people values in the black community that we weren't seeing. A black doctor and a black lawyer? What? Unheard of. But look at what we were being seen, we were being shown. When the camera angles were moved just a slight bit, and Cliff, I'm gonna call him Cliff for the sake of television, not the sake of what happens in the world, right? Cliff and Miss Huxtable, when they would kiss, it was the assumption that they were kissing because of the camera angles. Now the TV producer is like, nah, I need y'all to do it. Our children can't unsee that. And so we're all being exposed to almost like a rated R world, a rated X world. We can't shield them after they have been exposed. The biggest challenge is that we know, like we are the ones who now know that oppression, all of the isms exist. And we've been activated because we're the ones that's supposed to do something about it. Because if we didn't do anything about it, they would say, oh, they like it. They would say, you know what? I'm going to create an ordinance that allows for slavery to exist because I want you to work for me for free. So therefore, it becomes a proclamation and not a law that says slavery is abolished. Because in the 13th Amendment, the power is not even in the first section. The power is not in the first section. The power is in the second section, which says, Congress shall have power to enforce this article through appropriate legislation. And so now when I look at conditions that we are fighting against, I'm very much aware that there's an overwhelming presence in our communities, the communities who've been pushed into the margins of life. I don't want to say pushed into the gutter, but pushed into the margins of life. We didn't want to be there. And so now we have to figure out, like, that fight, if we don't do anything, every time we open our eyes, we're going to be like, man, I got to close the blinds again. I got to consume the thing that's going to allow me to get through the day. It almost causes us to become sleeping giants. Because if we succumb to, like in my community, I live right on 125th Street. I live right around the corner from where the young man who was shot in the head in the smoke shop, and then the guy who shot him in the head walked out and came back in as he was getting up and he shot him again. Murdering. I live right around the corner from that place, like literally right around the corner. When I was living in Georgia, if somebody said, I live right around the corner, right up the block, you'd be like, all right, cool. Man, how far did they say up the block? In New York, if you say up the block, it's like literally up the block. In Georgia, you might be in Marietta. And you live in McDonough. I'm just up the block. Man, I've been driving for an hour. What's wrong with that? But we have to do something. As a matter of fact, we will feel terrible if we did nothing. Because those who know are not like those who don't know. That's part of secrets. The secrets in life. Those who know are not like those who do not know. But if you know and you do nothing, that feeling that you feel, you could literally become courageous. and stand in spite of being afraid to do what's right and necessary. Because if you stand, and then all of a sudden you realize that by you standing, like I had to find this out for myself. Came home from prison, I was hiding in plain sight. I'm 6'3.5". I didn't want nobody to recognize me. People be say, man, you look familiar. I just got one of the familiar faces. Now I can't go anywhere. I might have a hat on, some shades on. They be like, oh, snap, that was Yusef Salaam. Wow, he live in our community? And I hear them. I'm like telling my wife, I said, they recognize me? I thought I was incognito, you know? But we have to do something. That's the beautiful thing about it. That's really the gist of what I'm saying. Because if we do nothing, not only will it disturb us, it will metastasize. Dr. Maya Angelou, she said you should be angry, but you must not be bitter. Reminding us that bitterness is like a cancer. It eats upon the host. It doesn't do anything to the object of its displeasure. And then she teaches us alchemy. She says, use that anger. You dance it, you march it, you vote it, you do everything about it. And then she said, you talk it, never stop talking it. There's magic that happens in utilizing the ability to do something to transform the condition that you're under. It's magic that happens. It's life that happens.
Well, I think we'll go ahead and transition to audience questions if anybody wants to go ahead. Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. Got it.
I think do we have a question up over there, or were you waving? Oh, okay. Okay. Y'all don't be shy. Okay, we have a question over here.
Thanks. Hi, Dr. Is it on? Yeah. Hi, Dr. Salaam. Speaking on your point about bitterness, for the younger generation of the folks who look like you and I, what advice would you give to balance out coming to grips with the reality of prejudice and injustice with promoting internal fortitude and optimism? Like, what would you, having a conversation with a younger kid, like you want to prepare them for the world, but you also just don't want them to develop that bitterness at a young age. Like, what advice would you give to the families, the parents, or even the kids who have to face that juxtaposition?
Yeah, I love that question, actually. I think that the biggest advice that we can give ourselves is to use all of the tools that we never do. Like, Black men in particular, we don't talk. Women talk all the time. I see my sister in the audience right there, I mean, listen, women will literally be at the dining room table, and it could be her friend right there. I'm about to go to the bathroom, powder my nose. Girl, I'm going with you. It's a lot of conversations that happens in the bathroom. But men, first of all, it would be really awkward for a man to be like, hey, bro, I'm about to go powder my nose. Hey, let me go with you. Well, there's only one stall. But the cool thing about it is that when we take these tools, and I call them tools for a reason, if we, even with our children, if we get the opportunity to have them talk about the situation, we could then give them or gift them with tools that helps them to overcome these types of things. Because the worst thing that happens is when you internalize something and you become, like in my book, Punch in the Air, I talk about this. Like, Punch in the Air was supposed to be my memoir. But I was in contract writing the film When They See Us with Ava DuVernay. And so Better Not Bitter became my memoir, but it's really my thesis. It is my understanding of what happened to me told through my story, and the story is still being written. It's literally still being written. Even what I'm saying to you, this is not even in the book, but I wish this was in the book, and that would be it. But we have to give our children a fighting chance. And by that, I'm saying, like, if we have our children use their words, if we talk with them and not at them, like, children their humanity is there too. And because they are using their eyes and their hearts to live life, you know, my son, he's 7 years old. I can't go with him everywhere. But when he's not feeling well, we found out, like, my wife, she'll call me, oh, he had a bad day today. So I you know, when I get on the phone with him, if I'm traveling in the world, hey, what's going on? Are you all right? Oh, yeah, you know. We found out that the precursor to his bad day was him thinking that I was going to be home before I came home. And so I needed to know that I needed to give more FaceTime, literal FaceTime, because these aren't smartphones. It's what we do with the phone that makes it smart, right? I had to give more FaceTime so that he knew, hey, I'm just over here. I'll be back tomorrow. I'll be there when you get home from school. But just like the president said, President Biden, he said, inshallah. And I said, did he just say inshallah? Hold on, somebody send me that video. Rewind that piece. He said, inshallah. Y'all know what inshallah means, right? It means if it be the will of God. But I mean, sometimes when people say that, it's not really like, if it be the will of God. It'd be like, yeah, I'm not coming. Hey, we having this real great party. You know, you have availability such and such a time. What time? Oh, inshallah. But we got to be able to, like, you know, in truth, in gifting our children the best that they can utilize, because the best thing that we can teach our children is that when they get knocked down, Les Brown said to me, he said, Yusef, I tell people all the time, it's not a matter of if you fall. I tell people you will fall. I tell them when you fall, try to land on your back. Because if you can look up, you can get up. So, yeah, the great philosopher Cardi B said, knock me down 9 times, I'll get up 10. But you got to understand that in the getting up is where the gift is. Because when that 2x4 came and knocked me down, when the rug was ripped from underneath my foot, first of all, when a 2x4 came, I might have got hit the first time. But now I'm living in a certain level of hyper awareness that if I see that 2x4 out of the periphery of my eye, I'm going to learn how to duck. If the rug is going to get pulled out from underneath my foot, look at the nature in the human being. We automatically reach for something to hold on to, even if we don't see nothing there. That's the rope that God put out for us. And so we got to tell our children these spiritual truths as well. Like, you will be okay if you do good. But that doesn't mean that bad won't show up at your doorstep. That just means that if you fall, get back up. Use that to cause you to become a diamond. Use that to strengthen the resiliency of self. Because by the time you can look back, you'll realize that the only way to go through hell is to keep on walking. There will not be a path other than the path that you just made to get where you are. And some of us literally are given that part of existence. Like, when I look at my life, I would have never chosen to go to prison for a crime I didn't commit, to possibly, at some time in the future, be found innocent. You know all the stuff that you got to go through as a convicted rapist? that branding, the only crime that trumps that is child molestation. And I hate to even use the word trumps that in the word, because I ain't even use his name when I showed y'all the ad. But inmates have their own way of dealing with that kind of atrocity. And to be able to be gifted with the fires that they try to consume you, don't even burn you. You come out of the fire smelling like Shadrach, Meshach. You know, in the black community, they say, and a bad Negro, but you know, a Bendigo, you know what I'm saying? But it's all of that. It's all of that. It's all of the real conversations that our children need, because they, you know, we want to shield them, but our children, they're exposed to so much. They might know about, like, I didn't get the notice that our good friend Harry Belafonte passed away. My daughter, one of my younger daughters, sent that notice to us. We're like, what? He passed away? Wow. But it's all of that. Having like those human conversations, because we're almost living in a time now where our children are not given the opportunity to even have a childhood. And as much as we can, we got to give them that ability. The other thing I will say about that is this. When I was sitting on stage with Oprah Winfrey, you know, she looked at me and she said, "Yusef, how did you get through it?" And I said, "I meditated." And that's something that we have to train our children to do. Because wherever your mind goes, your body follows. Praying is necessary, but meditating is listening for the answer. Because as you walk throughout life, you want to stay on point, but you also want to be able to trust God. Staying on point is tying your camel up. You know, it's like, I tell my wife all the time, look, when you leave the car, we don't live in Georgia no more, don't leave your purse in the car with the car running. Not that she does that, I'm just, just painting a picture. She doesn't do that anymore. But it's all of that. It's all of the beautiful things that we want our children to know. It's not so much about giving our children all of the things that we didn't have, unless those things that we're giving them is the tools that they can use to navigate their way forward. But if we give them the other stuff, the material things, it could almost be more debilitating. But if we give them the ability to think, if I give them this phone, it's going to be a hand-me-down, because these phones cost too much. And it's 10 of y'all. But I need to have you think so that this becomes a smartphone. They don't tell you it's a smartphone. I want you to know that it's a smartphone. And I want you to utilize it as a smartphone, because you're the one who's smart. And they need to know that. That doesn't mean that they don't have to, participate in playing games on it and stuff like that. But at some point, you got to be able to say, when you say, "Hey, Dad, how do you spell such and such?" I'm going to tell you how to spell it, but I'm also tell you a secret. The secret is you can go to your phone, you can hit that microphone, and you can say the word and look at it and say, "Oh, I didn't know. Okay, that's what that says? Okay, cool." You might even be able to hit pronunciation. Listen, okay, you pronounce it like that, okay? And all of these are, this is the way, like, in this world today, how you modernize and teach our children. How do you skip grades? Because they're basing how many jails to build off of our third and fourth grade scores. And that's not in the private schools. That's in the public school system. It's a concerted effort, because they are betting on you to have a child that is going to participate in the fallacy that you're going to be dead or in jail before you reach the age of 21, so that they can produce more jails, so that they become the oil in the machinery of the system. Yeah.
Do we have any more questions? Oh, okay, there you go.
Hi, thank you so much for being here. Our class had a question for you regarding the Innocence Project. What specific work do you do with the project to hold law enforcement accountable regarding false confessions, coerce, police interrogations, and vulnerability of juveniles during interrogations?
Man, we try to do all we can. And really, it's about using our very lived experience to chart a path forward. And so we've actually gotten legislation passed so that they have to record the full custodial interrogation. Because let me tell you, when people saw the Central Park 5 documentary by Ken Burns, when they saw that film, many of us used to be in the audience. Like, we would be in the background, and then there would be a part that we would come out and we would just standing there watching and listening. And it would be the part where Raymond Santana would read his false confession as a 14-year-old. Now, he's 14 in 1989, but he's an adult now reading the same false confession. He's not altering the words. He's not doing anything. He's literally saying what reads like, at approximately 9 p.m., me and a group of my colleagues began to walk south. And the beautiful thing that he does is he looks up and looks at the camera and says, what 14-year-old boy talks like that? You could hear the audible gasp in the room. People saw that same video, and they said the same thing that Mayor Ed Koch said. We got him. They didn't pause for a moment and say, hold up. What 14-year-old boy talks like that? They didn't get the opportunity to see that Corey Wise had made more than one completely different videotape confession. In one of his confessions, he said, yeah, I looked in the distance, just like a quick look. And I saw somebody pull out a knife, and they just started slicing up. Central Park jogger did not have any cut marks on her from a knife. Even now, some of the arguments that you see on social media, like there's this, underneath the tweet that I posted where I did my own version of my full page ad, there's people who are going off on really interesting tangents about why we actually were guilty. And it's funny because they say, but Yusef is the only one that didn't do the rape. But in their ideations is like, oh yeah, because he was correcting the interrogator and this and that, and they never listened to Matias Reyes, the East Side rapist and the East Side slasher, tell the truth. And when he retells the truth, it's horrific. Because he's talking to Cynthia McFadden on Channel 7. I think you can still Google this. He's talking to Cynthia McFadden. And she's like, well, tell us what happened. And he said, I did this, and this is how I did it, and so forth and so on. And then he said, when I was leaving the park, the police came to me in the police car, and they put their light on my face. And they said, oh, it's Blondie. Hey, Blondie, you see any young people out here? He said, nah. He said, well, okay, well, get out of here. It's a little crazy in the park tonight. He put the headphones on that he was listening to and walked out of the park. And he told Cynthia McFadden, had they took the light and just went like that across my body, they would have seen that I was bloody from the waist down. Raymond Santana and Kevin Richardson were arrested on April 19th, 1989, the same day that this happened. They didn't even have a drop of blood on them. The same Walkman that they're saying that somebody said, oh, my friend so-and-so took, that was the Walkman that Matias Reyes, who raped the Central Park jogger himself. Because when you look at all of the evidence, there's a photograph of a drag line. The drag line symbol, it's like the most obvious thing. That looks like a single line. So therefore, what can we conclude? There was a assailant and a victim. But they're saying it was a gang rape. Well, it wouldn't be a single line. Impossible. Okay, y'all, line up. No, that's not how, nobody moves like that. So all of the stuff, and the worst part about this story, the worst part about it is that they made the public believe that we were the ones who did it. And because they had their hands on us, that vice grip was so tight, it allowed for the real perpetrator to commit more crime. One of his last victims, a young lady named Lourdes Gonzalez. And horrific. He's retelling all of this stuff, by the way. He said he came to her home, he brandished a knife, and she pleaded with him, "Can I just put my babies in the next room?" He said, "Yeah, go ahead." She put her children in the next room. She closed the door. She's pregnant. In her mind, I could almost imagine. She's probably saying to herself, "This is going to be bad, but it's going to be something I'm going to be able to get through it, but it's going to be bad." She shielded her children because she didn't want her children to witness, because they can't unsee that. His modus operandi, every single one of us have one. We like just this amount of butter on our toast. I tell my wife, "Can you burn my toast? I like my toast crunchy." She's like, "No, that's nasty." But babe, I'm the one eating it. Her MO is she wants her toast lightly toasted. Right? If you have children, you know your child was in the kitchen, because they left DNA evidence. Peanut butter and jelly on the counter. I told you to clean up after yourself. Like the juice is still out. I mean, all of that. It's like we have very specific ways that we do everything. We put our clothes on a certain way. We brush our hair a certain way. We brush our teeth. That is our modus operandi. This was his modus operandi. He started telling his victims, "Your eyes are your life." That means if they wanted to live, he cut their eyes out. And at the very end of his crime spree, he wasn't even giving his victims a choice. And so it's all of that. It's all of that. This is a... Yeah.
I believe we are at the close of our discussion today. Can we all give a warm round of applause to Dr. Yusef Salaam?
I'm just going to close this out real quick. I want to thank Dr. Yusef Salaam on behalf of our incarceration class for joining us this evening. Your story is powerful and compelling. It's an inspiration to us and to anybody who's heard it. It illustrates the truth of that Dr. Martin Luther King quote, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice." I also want to thank Professor Hoffman for inspiring our class to learn more about the issues within our criminal justice system and to get more involved in the community. Thank you to the Center for Community Engaged Learning and the Chief Diversity Officer for sponsoring this event, and to all the students and faculty that attended and contributed to the discussion. To all the students, especially my fellow seniors, I hope this will also encourage you to get more involved in the community as well. And finally, to Dr. Salaam, good luck on your run for City Council.
Yeah, woo! Y'all better vote.
And I will
Tell a friend, if you're not in the District 9, Central Harlem, just tell your friends. We are trying to change the world. And this is a movement. This is not about the next 4 years, because you can't really change anything in a year's time, 2 years' time, 3 years' time. This is about us making a ripple so that our children's children's children will be thankful for what we are doing.
Thank you all so much for coming.